Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are doing another just podcast episode. I did one of these before. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out here. I don't remember what the topic was off the top of my head, but it's one of my podcast episodes. If you're not already following my podcast, it is called Teaching in Your 20s and it's available on Spotify and on Apple Music. I figured I would set up my camera and just record today's episode as I do it in real life. Also, I apologize for the mess. I still am settling in my apartment in Madrid. If you also missed that, I will link that up here as well. But yeah, I'm currently teaching in Spain. I'm teaching kindergarten at an American school. I have done a past episode on how I got here basically and my whole story with Spain and all of that. So also go ahead and check that out. Also follow me on TikTok and Instagram because I post on there as well. Let's just go ahead and get into today's episode. Today's episode topic I'm actually really excited about because I feel like it can be very, very helpful at the beginning of the year because, things are just crazy at the beginning of the school year. So today's episode is going to be about how to get through the difficult days of teaching and how to push through those challenging days. So let's get into it. I need to finish my setup. I have some notes on my iPad. We'll get going with the setup. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Teaching in Your 20s podcast. I am your host, Christina Himmelho, and in today's episode we are going to be talking about how to get through those difficult days that we all have as teachers. And I'm sure that you have been in a position where you're today was one of the most challenging days with my kids, and it's really easy to fall down a rabbit hole of being really discouraged and just feeling you're not doing the best that you can as a teacher. And so I wanted to share some strategies, not really strategies, I mean just things that I try to do and try to remind myself of when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I've had a difficult day with a particular child, when I feel like my classroom management strategies aren't working anymore, because that will happen. And also, if you're a first-year teacher, I think this is the perfect time for me to be talking about this topic because, either you've just started in September, I just started school in September, or you've already been in school for a month and a half, you're starting to get the groove of things, and you're probably having some very challenging days. And I'm sure that if you're listening to this as a teacher, you can just relate to the fact that all of us have very, very, very difficult days. And yeah, I just want to talk about kind of how to get past those difficult days, and I want to bring some positivity in. You guys know I'm all about trying to encourage us who have decided to be teachers and stay teachers. I'm trying to encourage us to continue on that path because I do think that it's a great profession, and I also want to encourage those people who may be getting their degree in education and might be a little scared to be going into the education field because of the environment that we have right now in education, which is one of people maybe discouraging you to enter the education field. But I'm here to help you to push through those difficult moments that you may have in your classroom. I also wanted to apologize for the fact that there has not been an episode up in a while. I have been going crazy, running around. I've had literally no time to do my podcast. It's the thing that has fallen behind. I've been trying to post on YouTube. I've also been behind with that, but just with the whole move to Spain, the starting at a new school and all of that, I have been going crazy. But I'm hoping that today, me recording this, I think I'm really gonna get back into my groove and get into a good schedule. Let's go ahead and get started in today's episode. The first thing that I want to talk about is feeling overwhelmed. Oh my goodness, how many times a day do we feel overwhelmed as teachers? All the time, basically. I think that the first thing with feeling overwhelmed is allowing yourself to have that feeling. I think that's a big thing that I'm going to talk about in today's episode, is just sitting with that feeling for a little bit and being okay, this is okay. It's very normal to feel overwhelmed, especially with all that is demanded of us as teachers. And so something that I do when I'm overwhelmed, I think I've talked about this before in one of my other episodes, but the number one thing that helps me when I'm overwhelmed is getting everything out onto paper, or you can type it out, you can do whatever you want, but getting it out of my brain and onto a piece of paper helps me so much. So I will just make a list of all the things that are running through my head of all the things I need to get done. and then I'll highlight like the most important things that I need to get done, and that helps me be able to be like, okay, these are the top things I need to get done today. If I don't get these other things done that are not highlighted, like everything will be okay. I also think that when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's really good to talk to people about it, like kind of just like ranting about whatever's making you feel that way, whether it's the amount of papers you need to grade, whether it's about a particular student, whether it's about like a parent situation. It's just so nice to be able to talk to people about it, and especially I like talking to people who are not teachers about my day as a teacher, because it helps me to just talk to somebody who is not going to be like, oh, well, you should be doing this and this and this, because then I just feel more overwhelmed, and just talk to like a friend who's going to be like, yeah, that sounds absolutely insane, and like you're so valid for feeling that way. I find that so helpful. So those are definitely my like 2 top tips for when you're feeling overwhelmed, because especially with the list, like as you start doing things, you'll start to feel so much better. And like I said, part of our job is like being overwhelmed a lot, because it's just, we have a lot to get done. So I think building up like that tolerance of like, okay, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. I will get all the things I need to get done, and just moving on. Like let yourself feel overwhelmed, move on, do not dwell on it. You need to really think of the solutions. It's like, okay, these are the things I need to get done. What's step 1? Like taking it step by step, paso a paso, as we say in Spain. The second thing I wanted to touch on in just this episode of like difficult days, getting through hard times as a teacher, is teacher tired. So we all know, well, if you're a first year teacher, now you know, or if you're going into teaching, I'm gonna tell you, teacher tired is a real thing. It is absolutely insane, like how tired you will be after an entire day of work. And you really have to figure out like what helps you to feel better, because I know I see all over TikTok, Instagram, like social media, these like beautiful evening routines, these great like super healthy, I don't know, like teachers that will, or people just in general that will be like, okay, well, if you're really tired, you need to like make sure you're eating well, so like make yourself a full meal, but then that takes so much energy. And then they're like, I go to a yoga class and like all of that, but it takes a lot of energy. So I'm here to tell you, if you're teacher tired, go home and take a nap. After your nap, then maybe you will feel okay to make yourself dinner, and if not, order something in. Like it will be okay. It's not the end of the world, and you just have to figure out like what's gonna make you feel better. So for me, usually when I'm feeling like so tired, the only thing that will help me is extra sleep. Actually, this past week I was feeling so exhausted. I think it was this past Thursday. So I ended up coming home. I was like, it's too late for me to take a nap right now. So I went to bed at 8:30 p.m. I was in my bed by 8:30. I was trying to get something done and I was falling asleep. And so I just went to bed early and got those extra few hours that I needed, because I feel like for some reason, like caffeine just does not do the same thing as replacing like that sleep that I really need in that moment. And sometimes teacher tired for me is that like I do not have the energy to make myself dinner, so I'm gonna go out and get takeout and bring it home and watch Netflix and go to sleep. And it could even be something like mindless scrolling on TikTok, which is not good for us mentally, but like sometimes it's just helpful to disconnect. I'm gonna talk about this for a second and go on a quick rant about disconnecting. So something that I don't remember if I heard this somewhere or if somebody told me that they did this. I don't remember, but either way I want to share it on here as well. That after work, this person, or like wherever I read this, I don't remember, they had like a playlist that they would listen to that would like cue their brain to be like, okay, the school day is over and now I'm entering like my own time and my relaxation time. And for me, it's actually been kind of helpful in Spain with my school schedule. Like I take a bus and public transportation on my way home, and so that's like a perfect time for me to disconnect. Like the commute from school to my house is the perfect time for me to like listen to Harry Styles, listen to Karol G, like listen to their albums and be like, okay, now it's time for me to switch to focusing on myself. What do I need to do today? And whether that be, okay, well, I really have been wanting to go to the gym, whether that be I really need some social time with some friends who are not teachers, or it could be like I really want to call my mom. these are just examples like from my own life. I think that those things can really help to fill up your own cup, and that distinction between like school time and home time is so crucial in doing that and allowing you to relax. We're very like habitual creatures as humans, and the habits that we build really do affect our mental health. And so having a habit of like listening to music will cue you to be more relaxed and like not taking work into your home environment. Like if you have to work after school, go to a coffee shop so that you're not mixing the two things and like being stressed while you're sitting in your bed when you should be going to sleep because you used to sit on your bed and answer emails or answer class dojo messages. It really is so important to have that separation between school and home life. You really just have to listen to your body. Like listen to your body, as Sarah's Day says. I don't know if any of you follow her on YouTube, but I love her, and she's always like, listen to your body. And that's one of those moments with Teacher Tired that it's just like you need to listen to your body if you have the opportunity to take the rest that you need. The next thing that I want to talk about when it comes to having difficult days as a teacher, I feel like one of the things that I felt a lot as a first year teacher was comparison, and not feeling like I was doing good enough because I would hear about things that my other team members were doing and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not doing that. How am I providing the best education to my students? I think this is like one of the hardest things to overcome because, I mean, comparison in general is really, really hard to not do, especially when it's your first year teaching and you already feel like you have no idea what you're doing. And then when you hear maybe at lunch about like what your other teachers or the other teachers in your team are doing, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing that. Like, I should be doing that. One of the most important things to remember is that these teachers have been teaching for so long. It's just you can't compare it. Like, they were at your place once when they first started teaching, and they were not as good as they are now. Like, after years and years of experience, of course, the veteran teacher is going to be doing a better job. Like, probably, most likely. Sometimes veteran teachers like aren't doing as much as they should be, but like I'm not going to get into that. But just basically we know like that with more practice you get better at a certain skill, and teaching is a skill. And so I definitely would try to limit also my intake of people on social media who were posting specifically teaching strategies, because it became really overwhelming to see all of that and to be like, oh my gosh, I need to be like that. I think the most basic way to say it is it's great to take inspiration from other teachers, but be your own teacher, do things your own way, and do not compare yourself to them. And if you feel yourself comparing yourself to them, just like remind yourself, because it's very natural, like it's going to come across your mind. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, like I should be doing this or that. And when that happens, just remind yourself of like, okay, well, what can I take from that? What inspiration can I take from that and implement in my classroom? And it does not mean, that does not equate to I am not a good enough teacher. I think that's really, really important. And you know, just being kind to yourself, basically. Like your first year of teaching is so much learning. And even after your first year, like I'm in my second year of teaching right now, but I still feel like I'm learning so much, seeing different things that I want to take inspiration from and still have my own teaching style. So I think that's like the bottom line of it. Like when you feel yourself comparing yourself, you feel jealous of another teacher, like our jealousy definitely stems from an insecurity that we have. And so I think you can flip it more positive and be like, okay, well, what inspiration can I take from this person that I'm feeling kind of jealous of, basically. This can also happen, not even with comparing yourself to veteran teachers, being in situations where you need to talk to parents and not feeling confident enough. I'm assuming that a majority of the people who are listening to the podcast have some type of educational background, whether that be that you went down the traditional path in college of getting a teaching degree, or that you switched your career and you've been teaching for a little while. You have to just be confident in the skills that you know, and do not try to say things that you do not know. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like there's nothing worse than like a parent asking you a question and you making up an answer that you don't know. Like just tell them, I don't know, I can get back to you on that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. And I think that sometimes when we don't know something, we're like, oh my goodness, like I should already know this, even though like it's your first year out of school, and how are you gonna know all of the rules off the top of your head? Like that's just not, it's not feasible. Basically just remembering that like you're prepared as you can be, and just doing the best that you can. And I think that with practice, like the confidence will come. Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. That's kind of the name of the game when you're presenting in front of parents, especially at open house when it's your first year teaching and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but here I am. Okay, the next topic that I wanted to touch on is burnout. So with burnout kind of ties in with the teacher tired, but I want to talk more about like not making your entire life teaching. This is like a more of a personal thing to me. This might not resonate with you. For me, teacher burnout, a lot of it has to do with like the amount of time I spend thinking about doing anything related to teaching. I find that like if I'm talking about teaching outside of work so much, if I'm bringing work home, if the only thing that I'm doing in my life is about teaching, I will go crazy, and that's when I feel like I will experience teacher burnout. Or another time that I have experienced it, and I mean like teacher burnout I think is more of a long-term term, but I have felt burnt out when I have been spending all of my energy focusing on like one or two students, when my energy should be distributed equally among all of my students. So when like all of my time and attention was given to a couple of students in my class that maybe I had more of a difficult time with managing their behavior, or that I was, anything. Mainly the behavior management part I think is where I was like, oh my goodness, my entire day I'm spending just thinking about how to work with these two students, and it's taking away from the other students. It's taking away from the attention that I can give to my other students. And so really with that, I just had to realize like I need to be giving my other students the same opportunity, and my energy cannot just be given to one or two students. And so it's really hard, but sometimes you just have to take a step back and be like, you know what, I have like a bigger duty here to all of my students. I can talk about that more specifically like in a future episode. But yes, with teacher burnout, I would say that like on those really hard days where you just feel like, oh my gosh, did I choose the right career? I really try to think about one or two things that have gone well during the day or in the past week, and just like forcing myself, like you can just think about it in your head, you can write it down, like two positive things that happened that day, and then you'll realize that it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. Like in no way am I trying to say that like your feelings aren't valid. I'm just sharing that with me it helped to really focus on the positives that happened during the day, because I am 90% sure that you can think of like two things that happened that were really great, whether that be like a student giving you a hug or something really funny that a student said in class. Just kind of like reminding yourself of your whys. And my internship teacher, she kept a binder of like cute letters and notes and pictures that her students had drawn for her. She would look at that like on her hard days and be like, this is my why, like I'm impacting so many students in such a positive way. And so I think that's a really, really great idea, and I think it's really cute, because it is really hard, like when something bad happens during the day, and our tendency is to just really focus in on that one bad thing and be like, oh my gosh, I had a bad day, like that's it, like my day was only bad. But when you really think about it, like it was a portion of your day, and that's completely valid. But there also were some really great things that happened during the day. So just trying to like spin it in a positive way. The next thing that I wanted to touch on was parent conflict. With this, I really just want to talk about like not taking things to heart too much. So obviously teachers were very caring people, and we're usually very empathetic, sympathetic, all of that good stuff. And that can sometimes make it hard because, at least for me, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, but I feel like I take on people's emotions pretty easily, and I also tend to take things personally. Parent conflict, you really have to focus on not taking it personally. You have to do the best that you can. I always say, like, over communicate with parents until maybe they tell you, like, hey, like, I don't need to know all the little details of the day. But it's always better to over communicate to avoid misunderstandings, or to avoid parents being like, well, you never told me about this, like, why is this just coming up now? And if a parent does get angry about something, like, just understand that it's coming from them being protective of their child, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they, like, hate you or that they think you're a bad teacher. I've definitely heard of, like, situations that can be very difficult, and just trying not to take everything to heart so much, and definitely reflecting on, like, okay, how could I handle the situation better in the future, or if there's anything you could do. But sometimes there's nothing that you can do, and that, like, you've done the best that you can, and hopefully your administration is backing you up. And if they're not, just, like, saying, okay, I have done the best that I can in this situation, I'm gonna let it pass, let it go, and, like, not dwell on it. I feel like a lot of the things I'm saying in this episode is, like, don't dwell on it. Like, feel it, your feelings are valid, but try not to dwell on it. And that's why I like writing things down, because then I'm like, okay, I've written it down, I can, like, not think about it anymore. I also will be doing an episode in the future about communicating with parents, and, like, ways that I think are good, like, things to keep in mind, things that I do to maintain healthy relationships with parents, and try to avoid conflicts. The last thing I want to talk about in today's episode about, like, bad days, or things that could happen on bad days and how to get through them, is when you have a disagreement with a coworker. So this actually has not happened to me, thankfully. I've been working with very great people so far, and I haven't had any, like, problems with my coworkers, but I did have a request on Instagram to, like, talk about this, and I figured it would be a good time in, like, the having a bad day thing. Like, you could definitely have a bad day after having a disagreement with a coworker. As far as advice now, obviously, like I said, this hasn't happened to me before, so I'm just kind of speaking, like, I don't know, like, if a friend told me that they had a disagreement with their coworker, like, what would my advice be to them? I would say my advice is always to communicate your feelings with that coworker, and that coworker is either going to accept it and try to make things better, or they may try to make your life difficult, and you have no control over how people are going to react to how you choose to do things, how you choose to teach, how you choose to have and foster those relationships with your coworkers. And if something comes up and you talk to them about it and they just are not listening, or they're not trying to resolve the conflict, then there's not much else that you can do. I think that at that point, like, you have to protect your peace, you have to protect yourself, and just limit your contact with them. And if it's, like, really, really an issue, talking to your HR, talking to your principal, asking for advice. I think that in some situations there's just, like, not much you can do, and you might just have to, like, deal with it for a little bit. And if it's really, really, really that bad, like, remembering that you are not stuck anywhere, and if it's really taking a toll on your mental health, that you need to get out of that situation and move to a different school. And it might sound impossible, but I think it's so important to remember that you're not stuck, because I think that we can get really set in our routines, we can get set in the school that we've been working at and our ways. And I'm not saying that, like, just because you have a disagreement with a coworker that you should leave, but I think that more ties into, like, if you have administration that's not backing you up and things like that, like, if your school environment and school culture just isn't there, and not supportive, like, that's more what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, like, one specific person. But if you do have a problem with, like, one specific person, I think just, like, avoiding conflict as much as possible, staying in your little bubble with your friends, and honestly, like, avoiding that person if they're just, like, not being nice. Like, I think that surprised me as an adult, like, how some people can just not be nice, and I'm like, why are we not being nice humans? Especially as a teacher. To wrap up this episode, basically what the past 25 minutes of me talking has been trying to get at is, on the bad days, take care of yourself. And whatever way you choose to take care of yourself, just pour some love back into you. It is so normal to have bad days. You can have a whole bad week. You can have a bad month. Like, it doesn't matter how many years you've been teaching, you're probably still going to have a bad day at some point, and just trying not to let it get to you. It doesn't define you. Your bad day does not define you at all as a teacher. And I mean, we're all human.